Trends, automotive or otherwise, typically operate in cycles. An idea will be had, people will decide it's a good idea, it will reach peak mainstream popularity before the public either moves on to the next thing or collectively decides it wasn't such a good idea after all, only for said thing to then make a comeback decades later. Think mullets, baggy jeans, 80s synth pop, fascism. It's a phenomenon that can be observed all across the cultural spectrum, but believe it or not, this is a car channel, so we can look at how it applied to the humble station wagon. Once the default family car, until it was usurped by the minivan, and then the same thing happened with the SUV, and I hope to whatever is out there that the cycle repeats once more with crossovers. Part of it is a generational image thing. We don't want to drive the same type of cars that our parents did because that's just inherently uncool. However, wagons, or estate cars as us Brits would call them, have been having a bit of a renaissance lately. And in recent times, the same thing has quietly been happening with the minivan. VW's hugely popular ID buzz serves as an antidote to all the endless lifeless lifestyle crossovers. The Lexus LM is a genuine alternative to a luxury limo, and the Mercedes V-Class exists for... Actually, I don't know why, but it definitely exists. The point is that they have all found their own niche space in the market, but none of those minivans have anything on the wackiness of the main subjects of today's video. These were too weird even for the peak minivan era. Here are some minivans that were too mad for production. We're starting off with an honourable mention, as this is a more recent concept than the rest. The Porsche Vision Renndienst was revealed to the world in 2020 with the release of Porsche Unseen, a book that uncovered 15 different design studies and concept cars that never saw the light of day. The Renndienst was designed in 2018, but its history goes back much further than that. Renndienst is German for racing service, and that was a name Porsche first employed on a pair of VW transporters way back in 1951. They were there to haul mechanics and spare parts about in order to aid Porsche's bids at the 24 Hours of Le Mans and at the Mille Miglia. At the latter of those two events, they proved particularly useful as regular trucks were just too big for some of those tight Italian streets. And over time, the Renndienst vans reached iconic status with Porsche people.
It's supposed to hark back to the iconic 2.7 litre R. It doesn't.
What do you mean, iconic?
Well, that's what Porsche people do.
Anyway, now they're mostly used for marketing opportunities where they can serve as a cute little food truck and things like that. Despite sharing a name with those vans though, the Vision Renndienst is a very contemporary Porsche in its design, with super thin headlights and a full-length light bar at the back. It's also all electric, and although no images of the interior were released, is said to have a central driving position. But of course, the main takeaway is that it looks like a Smeg fridge. Anyway, on with the list proper. Like the Porsche that we just talked about, this minivan comes with its own caveat, in that it's not exactly mini. In fact, it's gargantuan, at almost 6 meters in length. Also like the Porsche, the driver sits in the middle, but that's where the similarities end. The Columbus was revealed in 1992 and, unsurprisingly, is no tree-hugging EV. Instead, all four wheels are powered by a 300 horsepower BMW-sourced V12 engine, which was enough to take this monstrosity to a claimed top speed of 130 miles an hour. Speaking of that engine though, the 5 litre lump was mounted transversely and sat directly beneath the driver's seat, necessitating the raised roof at the front of the vehicle to allow for more headroom. Further back, up to 6 passengers could sit in the lap of 90s luxury, with seats that could be swiveled and twizzled in a variety of different configurations, although obviously you wanted to be facing towards any one of the TV screens that was hooked up to its very own VHS player. How delightfully 90s. The Columbus was aimed at the US market and actually was intended to go on sale, but just like the car's name, it was all built on lies, and the Columbus remained as merely a concept. No doubt it would have been hugely expensive to produce given its complexity, with features like 4-wheel steering. The body was also made out of carbon fibre, so when you combine that with the central driving position, BMW V12 engine and 5-speed manual gearbox... McLaren F1? Anyone? They were even released in the same year. Italdesign described their creation as a ship for dry land, which I guess is the most charitable way of saying it looks like what AI would spit out if you asked it to generate an image of someone surfing into the back of a Fiat Multipla. Speaking of things crashing into the back of other things, behold the Plymouth Voyager 3, Chrysler's answer to the growing environmental concerns of the late 80s. An 8-wheeled tractor-trailer minivan thing with 2 engines. Allow me to explain. The front half of the Voyager 3 is actually a car in itself, a 3-seater microcar with a dropped rear axle that allowed it to separate from the back half of the vehicle. In the front resided a 1.6 litre engine, fueled by propane, apparently. When the 2 sections of the car were joined up though, what you had was an 8-seater minivan, with the rear section also having its own engine, a 2.2 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder, resulting in a combined 250 horsepower, all-wheel drive, and the answer to a question that nobody asked. The intentions were noble. Using a big vehicle like a minivan when it isn't always needed to haul kids about is a bit of a waste of fuel, and it would make parking much easier if you could just use the microcar when necessary. But unfortunately, the more that you think about it, the more the whole 2 vehicles in one thing is fraught with issues. Firstly, there would be the obvious expense, the main reason why the Voyager 3 didn't make production. And that includes maintenance costs, with the whole dropped axle mechanism and the electronic synchronization of the 2 engines. I can't imagine it being the most rigid vehicle either. Driving over a pothole would doubtless leave it quivering like a junkie at the crack of dawn. And then there's the question of how often you'd actually use the detachment functionality. If you didn't have a garage, the answer is probably never, because the whole rear portion of the van is completely uncovered once the front portion is separated, so you couldn't just leave it on the street lest some wildlife make it their new home. But above all else, could you imagine all the news stories you'd hear about parents who decided to eject their children from the back half of the van while travelling down the highway at 70 miles an hour? Wait, pause. Not like that. You know what? Moving on. The Renault Espace, the quintessential people mover. As we know, the Espace proved to be a smash hit with Piddingtons all across Europe. In order to celebrate the car's 10th birthday, Renault and manufacturing partner Matra created something very special. Behold the Espace F1, which, unlike most things purporting to have an F1 connection, was much more than just a cynical marketing exercise. Underneath a carbon fibre reinforced Espace body sat the 3.5 litre Renault V10 that was previously found in Williams' drivers and constructors title winning FW15C. The 800 horsepower engine sat quite literally in the middle of the car, between the 2 rear bucket seats. The power was sent to the rear wheels, meaning that it could carry mum, dad and 2 now deaf children to 60 miles an hour in 2.8 seconds, and onto a top speed of 193 miles an hour. This is almost certainly the most famous car on the list, being etched into the consciousness of anyone who had the original PlayStation and a copy of Gran Turismo 2. It's a mental creation that you can't help but love, so much so that I now own 2 Espace F1s. Granted, they're Hot Wheels ones, but shut up. In reality, only one exists, and it currently lives in the Matra Museum in France. It turns out the Columbus wasn't the only minivan concept to fall from the pen of the legendary Italdesign. Revealed in the year 2000, the Maserati Baran was designed by the big dog himself, Giorgetto Giugiaro. Only difference between the two is Maserati at least had the conviction to keep their badge on the car, unlike BMW, who, when presented with a Columbus, ran away screaming. Anyway, yes, your eyes do not deceive you, this is a Maserati with sliding doors, and a weird upwards lifting boot lid. Not very Maserati so far, but thankfully the engine was very much theirs. The Baran used the 3.2 litre twin turbocharged V8 from the 3200 GT. That meant 365 horsepower, in this case sent to all four wheels via a 6-speed semi-automatic gearbox. That would have made it decently quick, but bear in mind, the pictures are deceiving. This was a very large vehicle at almost 5 metres long and 2 metres wide. The intent was for the Baran to be an alternative to a luxury limousine rather than your average people carrier. As such, there were only 4 seats inside the Baran's swathed cabin. While it's a fascinating oddball, I think Maserati had it right when they decided not to go forward with this concept and put it in production, and instead just revive the Quattroporte. Besides, I imagine it would be quite embarrassing if you're a member of the Italian mafia and you end up getting trapped inside the vehicle when the electrics inevitably shit the bed and the sliding doors no longer work. In a biblically inaccurate turn of events, we will end with Genesis, specifically the Bertone Genesis, yet another mental minivan from a well-renowned Italian design house. And in equally topsy-turvy fashion, this vehicle was very much business in the back, party in the front. You see, the rear of the Genesis was almost normal. Access to it was obtained through some conventional minivan sliding doors, and while the seating layout was a bit weird, there were only 3 chairs in the back, arranged in a V formation, the front one could be spun around to face those behind for a bit of proper minivan functionality. At the front, however, things were much more weird. The front doors were of the gullwing variety, and said doors were also the windscreen. And to top it all off, underneath the 2 front seats you would find the engine, a 455 horsepower V12 nicked from the Lamborghini Countach. Oh yeah. That engine drove the rear wheels, rather unfortunately through a 3-speed automatic gearbox, doubtless a relic of the Lamborghini being owned by Chrysler at the time. That meant gear ratios wholly inappropriate for the engine it was mated to, and consequently it wasn't actually that fast. But who cares? It's not like anyone who owned a regular Countach cared about performance, for they were on enough speed themselves. It was quite literally the Lamborghini of minivans, even if it wasn't badged as one. However, the Italian manufacturer did actually flirt with the idea of making the Genesis after the end of the production run of the LM002 military SUV. So there we have it, 6 minivans that were too mad for production,